Okay, friends, I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of the Association of Iranica in Australasia. And it is a great pleasure to have you all here, and especially having this distinguished guest speaker, and also to discuss and in due course I will introduce them. But before anything else, I would like to acknowledge the indigenous people of Aotearoa Maori people, where I live at the moment, and also the indigenous of Australasia, and in fact, indigenous of all cultures around the globe. On the subject of, while we are on indigenous, allow me to tell you that as we speak, it is a special a kind of related really to the heritage too of the Maori culture. Today it's called Matariki Festival or celebration, which is wonderful in a sense that, you know, it has received a sense of recognition by the wider New Zealand community and culture. And therefore it is observed as more or less, well, it is a holiday actually in New Zealand today. So just to say a few words as it's described, I'll just read it to you. According to the Maori culture, the Matariki is a Maori name used to describe the entire star cluster, also known as Pleiades. And Matariki is a period of weeks, which usually it's around the latter part of June and in July, you know, in this period. And it has some wonderful elements, you know, apart from the cosmic side of it, which is more or less celestial, you know, about the star clusters, but also it has very ethical, beautiful moral principles of connection of human beings with nature and with the universe. And that's where, you know, the cultivation of plants and agriculture and farming and all those are promoted. And as a gesture, it's a kind of a connection between human beings too, the family day for, you know, a unity of family and all that. So the concept is very noble and beautiful. And I can see that, you know, in the abstract of Ali John, this more or less cross-cultural element exists between, you know, Turkey and Iran, you know, that he will cover it in more detail. All right, so this is basically a good starting point, and today we have a great pleasure and privilege to have Dr. Ali Mozaffari as our guest speaker. And just a brief biographical information about him. Dr. Ali Mozaffari is a senior fellow with the Alfred Deakin Institute at Deakin University in Australia, and his current research interest is geopolitics of the past culture and the built environment, with a specific focus on West Asia and Iran. And his publications include heritage movements in Asia, cultural heritage, activism, politics, and identity, which is edited by Todd Jones in 2020, development, architecture, and the formation of heritage in late 20th century in Iran, A Vital Past, which is a Manchester University Press in 2020, World Heritage in Iran, A Perspective on Pasargad, which is a Routledge publication in 2016, and Forming National Identity in Iran, the idea of homeland derived from ancient Persian and Islamic imaginations of place, which is IB Taurus 2014. Ali is also founder of founding co-editor of Bergahan's series Explorations in Heritage Studies. And this is only a brief, really, introduction of works of Ali and his research. And allow me also to introduce Dr. Karsten Paludan-Müller, who is an archaeologist, and he's from the University of Copenhagen. He was graduated in 1980 with his PhD, and he has held various leading positions within museums and heritage management in Denmark. From 2003 to 2017, he was the general director of NICU, which is the Norwegian Institute for Cultural Heritage Research. And after his retirement, he spent a year of extensive traveling to collect material for his ongoing work with cultural heritage and conflict in research and in hands-on projects. So since 2010, he has been occupied with the cultural heritage as a medium for cooperation between Turkish and Armenian heritage experts. And the focus has seen particularly on Armenian heritage in Eastern Anatolia. And related to this, Karsten has been focusing his research on geopolitics of heritage. And the aim is to develop an understanding of how long historical processes are themselves mirrored in our definition, perception, and the use of cultural heritage. And of course, in how its objects came into existence and developed before becoming defined as heritage. So I'll just leave it at that. Of course, there are a lot more information about his biography that I encourage you to refer to his website at the Cambridge Heritage website. So without further ado, I pass it on to our revered and distinguished speaker of today, Dr. Ali Mozaffari. Welcome, please.
Thank you very much, Masood John, for that wonderfully generous introduction that you made, and for the warm welcome. And I thank everybody here, especially Professor Paludan-Müller, who's honored me by accepting the chairmanship of this for today. And hello, everybody. Great to see you all, those whom I know and those who I don't know. In any case, let me share my screen. But before that, let me apologize if my voice is not totally up to scratch. I have a terrible cold, so I'm sure you will forgive me for that. I will share my screen and just signal if it, hang on, what happened? Okay, now let's see if this works. I suspect you must have me.
Yeah,
Okay, fantastic. Now, let's let the thing begin. All right. Oh. In this paper, which was co-authored with Dr. Ali Akbar, we used two well-known examples of Nowruz and Rumi to explore the use of heritage in geostrategic competitions between Iran and Turkey. Our point is twofold. First, that heritage is a vehicle for soft power and implicated in abrasive geostrategic competitions between rising regional powers. This in itself warrants a comparative study of heritage competitions. Second, that there is a continuum between domestic and international identity formations and politics, and heritage is a key factor in that continuum. I should credit Professor Heinz with the idea of the continuum, and I've tacked onto it heritage. These points also lead us to reflections on heritage in diplomacy and its role in the interplay between heritage studies and international relations. Heritage thus attains a dual significance as being central to nation-building projects, as well as serving as a carrier of symbolic content, including core national values in circulation in international arenas. Our approach is informed firstly by geoculture, which is defined as cultural structure that is disclosed through symbolic interactions across geographic space and on multiple scales. It suggests, on the one hand, that identity politics has geoeconomic and geopolitical implications, and on the other hand, that domestic power and legitimation are complemented by international power projections and identity politics. Shared cultural traditions thus perform symbolic functions as representations of a common set of cultural values. Secondly, it is framed as heritage diplomacy, which in the usual parlance refers to a set of processes where cultural and natural pasts shared between and across nations become subject to exchanges, collaborations, and forms of cooperative governance. This is, in fact, a definition forwarded by Professor Tim Winter, a dear friend of mine. For the purposes of this paper, the active use of heritage in support of foreign policy generally falls under heritage diplomacy. Our definition, which is slightly different to Tim's for heritage diplomacy, is that the active use of forms of natural and cultural heritage in advancing geocultural, geopolitical, or geoeconomic objectives in collaboration or competition with other countries. Competition here is key. Finally, there's soft power as the ability to co-opt other countries into an agenda by affecting and attracting them through culture, values, foreign policy, and history. These attractions are manifested through things such as national days, cultural events, and significant historical figures that promote cohesion internally and project prestige and distinction on the world stage. In other words, history is remembered and reinvented in the form of heritage to do work in and for the present. Soft power is the desired effect, while heritage diplomacy provides the operational framework for its realization. For Iran and Turkey, domestic power and legitimation are complemented by international power projections to the extent that, at times, it becomes difficult to separate the two or determine their order of precedence. This is where the dual function of heritage works for nation building and for circulating symbolic content, as I mentioned earlier. Here, it is important to note that at times, those symbolic elements that form the basis of this idea of continuum consist of invented traditions. Hobsbawm points out that invented traditions are characterized by invariance, formalization, ritualization, distinctive paraphernalia, and reference to and claiming descent from an unbroken immemorial past. Invented traditions also perform ideological functions by propagating forms of collective memory and identity and promoting group or social cohesion. As we shall see, they are particularly evident in Turkey's use of Nowruz. But before that, let me just canvass a little bit of the relationship between Iran and Turkey. In reflecting on the Iran-Turkey relationship, we should bear in mind that it is affected by their long historical competition since the 16th century. After 1979, Iran and Turkey, and 79 being the date of the Iranian Revolution, Iran and Turkey have maintained a close relationship, but have also competed over regional influence and leadership. In fact, we could observe a mixture of competition, occasional cooperation, and even confrontation as characterized as the characterizing factor of the relationship between the two countries in the past centuries, especially the last two. Under Erdogan, Turkey, in a neo-Ottoman vein, has tried to influence former Ottoman territories and emphasized Turkishness as a distinct civilizational designator. And this has caused detractors, including Iranians, to refer to this as a delusion and a distraction from Turkey's domestic economic problems. And you can see how they try to tease him over here. So he sees himself as an Ottoman king. Now, firstly, beyond civilizational outlook, I should say, that there are several sources of contention between Iran and Turkey. Firstly, Tehran has well-founded concerns over Turkey's promotion of separatism amongst Iran's Azerbaijani population who speak a Turkic language. Secondly, Tehran has concerns about Turkey's strategic relations with the West, especially the United States, its growing links with Israel, and its membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which we all know as NATO. In addition to this geopolitical rivalry, culture is another significant arena of competition between Iran and Turkey. Both countries use culture and heritage as a platform for expanding their soft power in the Middle East, the Balkans, Central and Southeast Asia, and the Caucasus. To this end, Iran and Turkey established cultural institutions to promote their regional cultural policy and soft power. The competition and rivalry between Iran and Turkey is therefore both civilizational and territorial. It is thus geocultural, especially in the South Caucasus, where Turkey has promoted a pan-Turkic agenda, relying chiefly on the Republic of Azerbaijan, whose relationship with Iran remains contentious even to this very day. In their geocultural rivalry, heritage is a means for expanding soft power, and here, by way of elaboration, I will focus on the two case studies I mentioned earlier, one of them being Rumi, the poet, and the other being claims and counterclaims over Nowruz. Now let's move to Rumi. Most of us know or have heard of Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi Balkhi, and generally in the West he's known as Rumi, in the East as Molavi or Mevlevi, depending on which country and culture you come from and what your language of origin is. He's a 13th century poet, probably born in 1207, a Persian poet, theologian, and mystic. He was born in Balkh, which is part of present-day Afghanistan, so it's outside Iran proper, if you look at present maps, and migrated through Iran or present Iran, to the west, settling in Konya. Now, the picture on one side of the black and white picture shows the kind of route that he has taken, and you can see that he's paid a visit to Mecca as well. The Sufi order known as Mevleviye was founded posthumously after him, and his residence, which you see here in the picture, is today the Mevlana Museum in Turkey. Rumi has multiple connotations as a Sufi master, a literary figure, and spiritual father for both the Ottomans and modern Turkey, and importantly, a commodified assemblage of heritage and tourism elements. He's also that. He's also the object of multiple rival claims, one of which I will mention here. In 2016, in Iran's intention to register Masnavi, which is one of his major productions, literary productions, Rumi's that is, on the Memory of the World program, which some of you might know is a program dedicated to registering especially textual works of literary value to humanity. This was met with Turkish objection, and this forced, to the extent that this forced an official statement on the part of Iran, clarifying that a registration on the list was not a claim to Rumi's nationality. Ultimately, the proposal went through jointly between the two countries, excluding and angering Afghanistan. So as I'm trying to show in this slide, you see that each one of these have a kind of nationality claim on the figure above, which is supposed to be Rumi or Molavi, depending on the language. Iran says he's Persian and part of Persian literary tradition, wrote and spoke Persian. Turkey says, well, actually, he's not. He's a Khorasani Turk. He died here, and he was ethnically Turkish too, by the way. And Afghanistan, which has a claim on the place of birth, actually, says that he was born here and his parents were from here. Come on, guys, you know, he must be Afghani. So we have this thing happening all the time. Now, moving on, Turkey uses images of Rumi and whirling dervishes, which you can see here, the Sama dancing, it's called technically, to enhance its prestige and maintains this imagery as a key soft power resource. Domestically, tourism plays a significant role, making Konya his place of settlement and then death, and the Mevlana Museum, the building we saw, a key space for heritage diplomacy. And Turkish state-affiliated institutions, scholars, and policymakers highlight the Turkish personality of Rumi. And as you can see in this picture, he's very much commodified. You can even get your own Mevlana Sama dance mug or cup for $18.06 Australian. It's a bargain. Do that. I recommend it. Let me give you another example of the tussle over Maulana. Praising Rumi's heritage in a speech, I think it's in 2014 in central Konya to commemorate the anniversary of Rumi's death. The Turkish president then and now, Mr. Erdogan, stated that, and I'm quoting, "If we have a homeland and a flag today, and if we live in an independent country, all fraternally," I mean, that's a point of question already, "this is thanks to believers like Mevlana," that is Rumi, Ahmed Yesevi, and as well as other generals such as Saladin and Alparslan. So you can see that it's how the claim over this character forming the spiritual founder of the country and being among on the pantheon of national heroes, how it works. Tehran initially reacted to Turkey's claim over Rumi's Turkish origins. For example, Iran's Cultural Heritage and Tourism Organization convened an international seminar to introduce Rumi to the world, while Iran's Saadi Foundation, and Saadi Foundation is a foundation dedicated to the promotion and teaching of Persian language outside Iran, so it's a tool of cultural diplomacy, promoted Iranian culture through initiatives such as Fumer in 2021. That's language in Turkey, none other than Turkey. The foundation head, the foundation head highlighted, I think somebody has their mic on. Yeah. The foundation head highlighted the importance of the Persian language, which has been influential and widespread in the Ottoman Empire, in reference to Rumi's popularity. Essentially, the suggestion here is that if Rumi is significant in Turkish literature and culture, and if you consider him the founding father of the nation, well, it's because he just migrated there. And his tomb happens to be in Konya, but don't forget, he's a Persian poet. Turkey and Iran also compete over Rumi's heritage in the Balkan region, particularly in Bosnia. The Turkish Cooperation and Coordination Agency, TİKA, carried out restoration projects to maintain the Masnavi reading tradition. That's the objective. The Mevlevi Lodge in Sarajevo serves as a Balkans Mevlana research center and hosts artistic and cultural events to keep Rumi's heritage alive. Iran has made significant investments also in conducting cultural activities relevant to Rumi's heritage, such as a ceremony on the commemoration day of Rumi, upholding him as a transnational figure of amity while highlighting his Persian character. Mind you, this is not just between Iran and Turkey. Even there are eminent scholars in Turkey that claim that his connection with Persian is beyond dispute, for the obvious reason that he only wrote and spoke in Persian. In Central and South Asia also, Turkey uses the figure of Rumi to increase its soft power. In Afghanistan, Turkey opened several Turkish schools and granted Afghan students, especially those with Uzbek ethnicity, scholarship to undertake their tertiary education in Turkey. While promoting the Turkish language in Afghanistan, TİKA, the formerly mentioned organization, also committed to the restoration of Rumi's home in the city of Balkh and transforming it to the Rumi Cultural Center, which was meant to include a lodge and a museum. The project was never materialized. The Afghan government, when there was one, of course, before the takeover by the Taliban, was interested more in collaborating with Turkey than with Iran when it came to registering the Rumi heritage internationally. And here I might add, that has already something to say about the success or failure of the two countries' soft power attempts. Iran has been absent from projects launched by Turkey and has experienced little success in using Rumi to enhance its soft power in Afghanistan. During tensions between Tehran and Kabul, and we have quite a few of them recently more, at the time, the president, Ashraf Ghani, sought, that's the Afghani president, sought to collaborate more with Turkey on Rumi-related projects, arguing, as I mentioned earlier, that Masnavi should be considered the common heritage of Afghanistan and Turkey. Why? Because, well, he was born here, he died there. Forget about the middle bit, which is Iran. Now, moving to the idea of Nowruz, we can see even further interesting complications happening. I'm now going to talk about the vicissitudes of this celebration, which I'll explain shortly, on the Iranian side, and including its shifting political appeal after the Iranian Revolution. Nowruz is a celebration of New Year that has been traced back to ancient times, well over a millennia, 2 or 3 millennia, sorry. In Iran, it's a significant event dedicated to the celebration of the first day of spring. One of its origins is a set of religious practices associated with Zoroastrianism, which culminated in this Nowruz around the time of spring. By the early decades of the Sasanian period, that is the last Persian dynasty before the advent of the Islamic conquest in 651, Nowruz was codified as the first day of spring and established as a symbol of imperial institutions. So you can see that in the ancient times, it was a calendrical event, and it related to various celebrations, often religious, and was concerning, procreation and harvest and the rest. In Persian literature, folklore, and mythology, Nowruz is particularly significant in its association with mythic kings, originating with Jamshid, and is thus also noted in the Book of Kings, or the Shahnameh of Ferdowsi, the Iranian poet of the 11th century. I might just add, for the benefit of the record, that Jamshid is also ascribed to a very famous Iranian World Heritage Site. In Persian, we call it Takht Jamshid. In English and other languages, it's called Persepolis. And also that the Shahnameh is considered subsequently, as was Ferdowsi considered posthumously, the champion of Iranian literary nationalism, and that book becoming the originary text. Nowruz has since remained a significant event in Iran. Nevertheless, after the 1979 Iranian Revolution, which we know as the Islamic Revolution, certain government officials and religious leaders attempted to downplay pre-Islamic symbols and cultural practices, including Nowruz, but such efforts were gradually abandoned. Again, at the beginning of revolution, there was discussion that this is actually a pagan practice, or it's a heathen practice. And because it relates to the association with what people derogatorily refer to religious Islamists as the fire worshippers, meaning the Zoroastrians. And therefore, this cannot be the main event, calendrical and official event of an Islamic country. So there was this line of argument. Fortunately, that's now been abandoned. Iran currently uses Nowruz to further its soft power in various ways. In noting its significance, it suffices to say that in 2016, this is interesting, Turkish and Azerbaijani initiative, it was jointly inscribed by 12 countries, including Iran joining it afterwards, like kind of reactionary, on the representative list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity. So we can see that Nowruz is not just a regional thing, and it's not just an Iranian thing. It has attained and retained a growing global significance in that sense. In Turkey, Nowruz has had a different trajectory. Now, let me show you just one thing on the previous slide. What you can see here on the page that shows the text, that's the registration inscribed in 2016, and all the different pronunciations of Nowruz in different dialects and languages of Nowruz, Nowruz, Nevruz, from Turkish to Tajiki to Persian. And what you see on the right, the two ladies, they are holding fire. That's in Iraqi Kurdistan. That's part of an, by the way, invented tradition, which is fine, but they're celebrating it with fire. As I said, in Turkey, Nowruz has had a different trajectory, which clearly demonstrates the continuity between domestic and international identity politics. In the course of a century, this popular heritage has been transformed into a contested political arena where conflicting nationalisms, and I'm referring to Turkey, nationalisms meet. Despite its Persian origins, Nowruz was celebrated in the Ottoman period, and as early as 1444, it marked both the start of the new year for the Ottomans and the beginning of the financial year. Early in the 20th century, and with the formation of modern Turkey, and we all know that that formation emphasized Turkishness and was very much ethno-linguistically centered, Nowruz was reconceived in a Turkish context. At the dawn of World War I, even just before that, Nowruz appeared in public discourse in Turkey in the service of the rising nationalism. From 1919, Kurdish activists and intellectuals began gradually to construct a repertoire of symbols of identity to counter the denial of Kurdish identity, which, as I mentioned, was the byproduct of the establishment of the new state. Borrowing from Iran through time and following their Iraqi brethren, they incorporated Nowruz and the mythic Persian hero, Kaveh, mentioned in the Shahnameh, that book that I mentioned earlier. Their activism ultimately led to the suppression of the movement and its associated symbols, including Nowruz, which was removed from the Turkish official calendar. As you can see, that this is immediately becoming political, and the reason it's been suppressed because it's securitized. It's a threat to the narrative of identity that the Turkish state at the time seeks to propagate, to maintain, and therefore to kind of purify from any other intervention, if you will. And we remember that this, until very recently, perhaps ongoing so, is also entangled with marginalizing Kurds. So by the 1980s, so before I move on, before this time, Kurds are also celebrating Nowruz. So it's not that the Kurds didn't have any Nowruz, or the Alevis, just as the other Turks in the Ottoman Empire did. See, but it's gradually shifting its tone. It's being contested internally there. By the 1980s, both Nowruz and the figure of Kaveh were co-opted for mass mobilization by the PKK, the Workers' Party of Kurdistan, which is a kind of an offshoot of the Marxist-Leninist ideology, if I'm not mistaken. The coup of September 1980 once again suppressed Kurdish movements and prevented the full popularization of this narrative because it firmly associated Nowruz with Kurdish militancy. So what I mean here is that as PKK begins to own Nowruz, to claim it, it takes it into the political arena. It politicizes so heavily that it then becomes impossible to negotiate it. It becomes something that the state then has to suppress. Well, I'm not saying it's good for it, or I'm not justifying it, but I'm saying that's from the perspective of the state, that now we have to, that's it, we have to suppress this. And that happens. Subsequently, using Turkish nationalist scholarship, and this is where it becomes interesting, that trace the origin of Nowruz to an ancient Turkic celebration, Ergenekon, coming from northeastern Asia. The state made it an official celebration in 1995. Now, let me just very briefly mention this mythology. I won't do justice to it, but it just gives you the picture. The first Khaganate of Turks comes under attack and is driven to a valley by the name of Ergenekon, and that valley is surrounded by mountains, as valleys are, and they're locked in for centuries. And their suppression continues until a hero comes. Note the parallels with Kaveh. Kaveh is a liberating figure as well in the Shahnameh, and melts the mountains that had enclosed these people, sets them free, and they can go out there and spread and, well, conquer the world or whatever they do. So it's a liberating and liberation mythology. And what's that date? That date is Nowruz, according to this post facto mythology. Thus, both the state and its Kurdish opponents have been inventing traditions that have transnational, therefore geocultural and geopolitical corollaries. What do I mean by this? The Turkish state says that this is about all Turks. This is the myth of origin of everything Turkic. So it's already beyond nation-state borders. It's transnational. On the other hand, Kurds are saying, well, actually, no, this is Kurdish. And we all know that Kurds are also distributed across multiple lands, which means that therefore we are having two versions contending and facing each other. Now, let's look more in the international arena. By the end of 1992, after the collapse of the USSR, Iran and Turkey sought to expand their influence in the former Soviet territories through culture and through religion. Some republics were ethno-linguistically Turkic, but also influenced by the Iranian world, the Republic of Azerbaijan being a prime example. Turkey emphasized ethnicity while using Nowruz as a pillar of its heritage diplomacy. For example, President Özal called for the formation of a new world order centered on Turkic countries. He emphasized the importance of incorporating Nowruz in their language, Nowruz, in our language, Persian, into discourses of Turkish nationalism and international policies and politics. So we can see that straight away, this has benefits. And how also, the other thing to see is how, in my opinion, in a very clever manner, Turkey relies on an area that could have been part of the zone of influence of Iranian culture.
I left that so you put it direct.
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think there was a something's on. Sorry. Yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, they can smartly use the ideas, and they're playing in this gray zone of politics, which is very, very interesting. Indeed, Turkey pushed 21st of March to be, that's the day of Nowruz, to be recognized by the United Nations as International Nowruz Day through the International Organization of Turkic Culture, Turksoy. Now, interesting, isn't it? Which was founded in 1993 in Almaty on Turkey's initiative. Great. Turksoy's former Deputy Secretary General Firat Purtash stated in 2011 that Nowruz, during the Nowruz celebration in the UN General Assembly Hall, that Nowruz had attained its real character and became an international day through efforts of Turksoy. Now, the thing is that this may sound self-serving, and perhaps it is a bit, but the point is that they have a point here. It was Turkey who put it on the map, not the Islamic Republic of Iran. So I guess they can claim that. Through Nowruz celebrations in various European countries and America, Turksoy has attempted to project Turkish soft power abroad. It has pursued similar goals in the post-Soviet republics. Seeking to enhance Turkey's soft power in these lands, Turksoy carries out Nowruz celebrations with the contribution of artists and cultural people from Turkic-speaking countries. And we know that they straddle the Caspian Sea, so Central Asia and the Caucasus are also involved, and also it has roots in parts of Europe. It has pursued similar goals in all these post-Soviet republics. Iran reacts against the Turkish appropriation of Nowruz and its claims that it is an ancient Turkish holiday and its attempts to de-emphasize its Iranian roots. That is de facto what the Turkish Republic and its allies do, the de-emphasis on Iran. Iranian presidents have often sent felicitations to some countries, such as Afghanistan and Pakistan and Tajikistan, where Nowruz is celebrated in all of them, as a means of emphasizing Iran's close cultural connections with those countries. However, Turkey has used Nowruz more effectively in pursuit of its objectives, despite problems with its claim to a pure Turkish origin for Nowruz. Tehran's efforts to project soft power through Nowruz are much more limited, and Iran has failed to work with other countries that celebrate this event, including Turkic-speaking countries around it, to hold common international events. So you can see that Iran is left out. Now, let me wrap up and conclude the discussion. I have been suggesting that Iran and Turkey use Rumi and Nowruz in formulating their heritage diplomacy and as means to attract and align other countries with whom they have historical affiliations. This is indeed the projection of soft power through heritage. This confirms that here, regional competitions have a strong cultural component at the very heart of which is heritage. Heritage diplomacy is a tool for constructing a geoculture and thus implicated in international power games. This has been omitted in some influential definitions of heritage diplomacy, as I mentioned earlier. Heritage diplomacy could have formed a contact zone for intercultural dialogue. For example, we see this or efforts towards this happening in the EU. In this case, perhaps in a different world setup, this could have been a contact zone between the Persianate and Turkic worlds. However, in this context, that contact zone is more appropriately framed as a zone of friction, where one country, Iran, reacts to others' exclusive claims to shared heritages. In Turkey, perhaps more than Iran, there is an alignment in the use of heritage for domestic and international identity and power politics. And this again exemplifies the dual use of heritage. Turkey used Nowruz to drown out Kurdish claims and to form a geopolitical power bloc. Still in formation, but it's going there, with economic benefits with other Turkic countries. As we see here, soft power projection framed by heritage diplomacy works in tandem with economic contacts and, dare I say, economic contracts. In the process, Turkey has appropriated traditions from elsewhere, a Kurdish invented tradition itself, into its official narrative, and also relied on other countries to mediate that, like Azerbaijan, to authenticate the claims over Turkishness in the tradition, over Turkish origin in the tradition, that is. The use of Nowruz to foster and strengthen Turkey's relationship with Turkic-speaking countries is founded on persisting cultural memory of Nowruz practices in those countries. This is an example of how countries, in competing for power, redefine their own heritage concurrently with their perception of heritage in the international arena, so the two construct one another. Iran's attitude has been different. Firstly, because of state ideology dominating the authorization of heritage forms and contents, but also perhaps because these forms of heritage were taken for granted cultural norms in everyday Iranian life. While being reactive to Turkey, Iran saw it necessary to use Rumi and Nowruz to increase its influence and soft power internationally, including in, but not limited to, Turkic-speaking countries. And this fueled their competition over heritage. However, so far, the results for Iran are not very promising. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We have to unmute you.
Well, thank you so much, Ali. This was very inspiring, very clear cut, and I'm sure it will inspire questions and comments from our audience. Before opening the virtual floor to others, I would like to say that I have one sort of reflection and question for you, which is, to what extent do you see, or do you see any continuity, any sort of other kind of heritage in the way these two states, the Iranian and the Turkish states, have, so to say, positioned themselves? In my understanding, Turkishness in the official ideology, so to speak, of Turkish nationalism is very much about conquest. It's very much about spatial geographical position, whereas as in the, let's say, in the Iranian Persian tradition, it's very much about language, it's very much about art, it is very much, in fact, about soft power, and not so much about territoriality, even though, of course, that is important too. But I think through history, at least the history since the Safavids, it has been the soft power that has sort of been the strength of the Persian state, so to speak. Persian culture dominating in the Mughal court, for instance, with some of the most important Persian literature being created there. Whereas in Turkey, I remember one scene that was when Erdogan reinstalled Hagia Sophia as a mosque. The talk was about the right of the sword as a Turkish tradition, the right of the conquest and the conqueror. So my question is there also a continuity embedded in the way the two nations tackle the use of heritage in their positioning in the world? Does this question make sense to you?
Yeah, thank you very much, Carsten. If I may give you my understanding of the question, and you tell me if that's what it is. What you mentioned, I suspect you're referring to whether there is a number one, a continuation of the old tradition of, as you put it, one being very territorial and the other one being less so. Does that exist? Is that the core of the question, or is the core of the question?
Yeah, that's the core. Yeah, that's the core. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting one, because I quite agree with you. Even there was a book by the name of Empire of the Mind, Persia Empire of the Mind, that was published, which kind of encapsulates in some ways, without trying to do any injustice to that wonderful book, that what you say in terms of that the Iran is above anything else, Iran or Persia, and I use them interchangeably, is above anything else an idea, as opposed to a definitive fixed piece of territory. So in that sense, in terms of the traveling of the idea, in terms of expanding or contracting it, and often it's been spreading, yes, I can see what you mean, and I can see that the Turks, broadly put, the Ottomans and the Turkish side, may have looked at the notion of territory. However, at the core of this, there is another question as well. I'm deviating a little from heritage here, but please indulge me. The question is this: what is a Turk? And I don't mean dismissively at all. I mean this most respectfully. Just like you might ask, what is an Iranian, right? And some of the definitions of a Turk, is it a fixed ethnicity, like you must have, I don't know, a certain skin color to be a Turk, or a certain complexion on the face, or height or physique, or I don't know, you know? It seems that one description in one of the books that I read was that being a Turk is like, it's like a bus. People get on it.
Yeah.
It continues. I'm sure you've read the book too, and it continues through history. And some people get off, some people go to the destination, to the end destination, or whatever happens. They're all Turks, regardless. So in that sense, if we look at being Turk, or being Turkish, or Turkishness, in those fluid terms, then they can be just as flexible as what is Iranian. If we want to understand Iran also, I think, understanding present-day Iran would not be thoroughly possible without understanding Turkishness, or understanding Turkicness and understanding what is Arabic, what is an Arab, equally speaking, in those terms. So I think, is that a function of geography? You bet. I think that's what it is, because these countries, there's so much exchange that it would be very difficult to actually do a surgical precision line and say, this is it, this is where the Turk ends and Arab starts. And therefore now we can look at them in containers, even though we might grant that the containers are historically stretching. You know, in that sense, when we look at these, it becomes a matter of nuance more than anything else. And when that happens, it becomes a matter of politics of the day. And by politics of the day, I mean in historical terms, like Turkey under Ataturk, as much as they cherished the idea of Turkishness, wouldn't have been as expansionist, if I may use this term, as you see it under Erdogan, who may have challenges for Ataturkian version of Turkishness, right? So is that anything but the politics of the day in that historical period? If you look at Iran as well, during the Shah period, there was a civilizational idea. And the thing about civilization, as we all know, is that it's multiple. And it incorporates multiple nations, therefore it straddles borders, so to speak, right? But the Shah's idea of a civilization, as grandiose as it may have sounded, is in many ways much tamer than, for example, the idea of the Islamic Republic when it goes and makes itself present in Syria. And then also attaches to it, whether it's a post-factual thinking or whether it was part of the propelling thing, let's leave that aside. They say, oh, we want to actually advance a particular Iranian Islamic civilization. That has been in the discourse in Iran as well. I have somebody's objecting to me, but I just want to say something, and I will stop. What carries these ideas are these symbolic elements that we use as heritage. And it seems to me that the kind of heritage that is, number one, shared, number two, it is soft. And by soft, I mean movable and probably even intangible. And I'm using terms loosely here because carpet is an example that is tangible, but it's movable, you know, but also intangible stuff like the Nowruz celebration. They are prime material for making these kinds of claims and then claiming territory in association with it. So that's how I don't know if I responded to your question.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you. Let's come back to that later. Now, I think I'll first give you the comment from Ali Rad. Would you like to chip in?
Thanks, Carson. Thank you, Ali, for a fascinating presentation. It was not opposing. I thought you're finishing.
I was joking.
Yeah. So, Mike, excellent points, and everything was fantastic that you pinpointed in history and the, let's say, geopolitics and the historical period that we are living in. My question would be, what is your opinion or how you see as a scholar when you look at this arena, that would it be possible that like the current government or like the current system in Iran in somehow exchange the Islamic heritage to, let's say, more of like the national heritage? And they said, okay, we did our best, we tried, but that was our best and we couldn't get Nowruz under our name, and let's focus on other things. Because I always remember from my dad and other people from a generation before that there was a discussion to change the national holiday to an Islamic holiday as well. So what are your comments? And I have a few questions if you don't mind, but I'll come back again to them.
Sure. Let me, yes, I agree, and I'll get into that. But before getting into that, let me state a personal memory. As you know, unfortunately, I'm older than you, many of you guys here, not Carson, of course, and Masood, but the others.
Are you sure?
but those two are still young at heart as well, and good looking. But in any case, I was at school I was in what do you call it? End of my rahnamai, we used to call it in Iran.
Middle school.
Middle or junior high or whatever you call it here. I don't know the equivalents right now. And that's at the time when this discussion of changing the Nowruz and or abolishing it came. And we were all chanting because the schools were recomposed. This is not a school of that you get homogeneous people from one socioeconomic class. It was all mixed. So everybody was in it, right? We were chanting, and I say it in Persian and translated, "Baraye hifz shishe, madrase bayad ta'til she." Which means that if you want to save your glasses, your windows, you should shut down the school. That's all the students chanting, meaning if you don't, we'll break the glasses, and we'll cause damage. So that was what I was 13 or something. That's the kind of memory in agreement with what you said and the discussion in your family. Now, sorry, you want to say something?
Yeah. When we then, if it's that, and please continue on your response. And when we think about this, I'd like to also hear your comment about what was the Pahlavi endeavors or like trials into like make it like an international recognition of an Iranian, let's say.
Sure. Let me respond first to the thing that you said about the efforts of the Islamic Republic in terms of what it sees as a national heritage. That has been precisely part of the problem of the Islamic Republic. It started with an ideology, a pillar of which was pan-Islamism. And therefore, it had within it this tension with the idea of the nation state and this internal tension with the idea of national, interest. Because let's not forget, why is Turkey doing this? Like inventing traditions or appropriating traditions? It is doing it towards its own whatever its perception of national interest is at the time. That's the reason. It wants to serve Turkey's national interest. When you have a state ideology that cannot contend with the idea of national interest or nationhood classically known, you get these tensions. And therefore, let's not forget, we had an Islamic state. The idea was we have to Islamicize everything. Anything that went to pre-Islamic period, and we have a dual meaning of Islamic. Islam starting from 1979, that's Islamic period modern. Prior to that, everything could have been potentially heathen. We got to prove their credentials. And Islam as in the date of advent of Islam. So especially in Iran, so pre-Islam, post-Islam. Anything that dates to the pre of these two is suspicious rather. And therefore, we either totally dismiss it, that's the safest bet, or we have to treat it with utter caution, because that can, sorry.
Yeah, can I just comment with that, or rather put in a question here, because in my understanding, there's also a very strong messianic tradition in the Safavid empire. And is that, in fact, part of the raison d'etat, which is carried on by the Islamic Republic? And now they have to struggle with this collision of logics of the nation state and a more messianic idea of what are we in this world to do?
It seems to me, Carsten, that is a fantastic observation. I think so. Dare I say, I believe so. The thing with the Shiism, especially the Messianic Shiism, as you very well know, became quote unquote state religion through the Safavid efforts. Yep. The thing with that is that it is an oppositional religion. So you might say that any identity is oppositional to a certain extent, but no, Shiism lives with the outside enemy. It's just the opposition is at the very core of it. If you take away the opposition and put Shiism ideology in power, it is more often than not, it is at a loss, because that's not where I'm supposed to be. I was supposed to be, I was supposed to become a martyr. What am I doing here? So that is, I mean, I'm half jokingly saying this, but that's really the psyche of it. And if you put it there, it doesn't know what to do. And we've seen that happening. And this idea of a perpetual revolution that we have, borrowed from Marxism, but really cast in a messianic Shiite narrative in the aftermath of the Islamic Revolution. This is where it's going. This is kind of what it does. And one of the problems is that what does this Shiism do? Because if you detach it from territory, how does it define a kingdom? Even for the Safavids, then how does it work? I discussed this in my first book about homeland. So how does this work if we take it out? Because, and especially in the modern world, and part of the problem of the Islamic Republic, it seems to me that it has been by design or by nature, undermining, without knowing necessarily, the idea of a territorial nation state or a territorial homeland in broad terms, because it wants to deterritorialize. And then that creates internal problems and external problems for it. If I may go back to Ali Rad's point about what they did, the idea was that we're here to advance the idea of the Islamic, right? Broadly defined, and also Islamic unity, which is one of the pillars of the Islamic Republic ideology, or at least upon its inception. Well, it was invented before it, of course, but it was appropriated into it. So if that's what we're doing, that's where we should be focusing our energy. And hence, that explains not fully, but partly the tilt towards other Muslim countries. Jokingly, people would say that at the beginning of the first two, three presidents of the Islamic Revolution, people would joke and say, Velayati, at the time was a foreign minister, oh, he's going and discovering new Islamic countries here and there. You know, he discovered, the so-and-so country of a brotherly country of so-and-so. What does that mean? That was the mission. And you can see that Iran is also presenting on that facet its soft power rather acceptably. Well, I don't mean in ethical terms, but considerably. In some Arab countries, in some North African countries, Iran has a presence. Even in Pakistan, it has a presence. But where does it falter? It has totally, this has come at the expense of what would have been traditionally the part of the Iranian world, if you will, not part of Iranian empire. Some of them were at points in time in history, but parts that they could have been close to us and us to them as Iranians. That has severed the tie. That has, and they only realized this. I'm sorry, I keep going on. They only realized this with the advent of the Iran-Iraq war, because that was a territorial war. That's when they realized, whoops, we can't do this. So that tension continues. Sorry.
So I think that if we try to widen the perspective, what we are talking about here, first of all, is the difficulties of Iran, sort of with its internal, let's say, logical complexity of being a nation and being salvata mundi, as we would say in Latin, messianic power. But it's also a wider question about how do you take what used to be a cultural continuum of empires with fluid borders and migrating people and put them into boxes and say, now you belong only one place. What would Rumi had answered if we had asked him, are you actually Turkish or do you think you are Iranian? I'm not sure how he would deal with that without having known him. But it would probably be a quite absurd question for people of that time. And I quite agree about this issue, this point you made with the Turkish bus moving across Eurasia and people get in and get off. But I also think that the Turks are aware of that. For them, it's more a question about acting in a sort of Turkish way, that's with a Turkish culture. I mean, after the Russian conquest of much of Caucasus, there was an enormous influx of Circassians, for instance, who became integrated into Turkey and became Turkified. They were not Turkish speakers when they arrived, but they became Turkish speakers later on, and I mean that's okay. If you look to Cyprus and take a genetic analysis of the population there, you will see that the Greek Turks and the Turkish, the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots share the same genetic pool. So it's only the sort of the surface of it, the cultural surface, the wrapping, which is different. But what I mean by this is that pitting the logic of nation state into territories that for not only for centuries but for millennia have been imperial lands in various configurations with shifting rolling borders, that's very hard. And that's why we have these sort of very, in some ways, parodic discussions about who owns which part of the past. But we should remember that also in Europe, where the nation state, so to speak, originated, there were similar battles earlier on at the creation of the nation states in Europe during the late 18th and into the 19th and early 20th century. There were people fighting the same fights, and what you can still see going on. A famous example for me on European soft power use of cultural heritage is the French. They're very good at it. If you take Chateau Versailles, which is on the World Heritage List, if you read on the UNESCO site, why is this part of World Heritage, you get all the reasons that this is a representation of French culture at its best, radiating out into the rest of the world and inspiring the rest of the world. Not a single word about the inspiration from Persian garden culture, for instance. Not a single word about the inspiration from Italian architecture, and so on. It's all about something which was invented entirely by France. And that's the logic of the World Heritage Institution. It's about defining some sort of super football league for national heritage, and not about a two-way street. And that's where you tell what you received and transformed and molded into this piece of World Heritage, and then gave it back in different configurations and forms to the rest of the world. That, I think, is part of the problem that we meet also when we dive into Nowruz and Rumi. Sorry, but yeah.
Can I just say one thing in agreement with you? It is very interesting because when we have shared heritages, and the case of Nowruz shows, like, who initiates it? Not Iran, which is supposed to be the main initiator, but it's not. Who does it? The Turks do it. So we see it in these cases. We see it in the case of the game called Polo, Chogan, Chevgan, by different languages again. These are pretty much the same thing. So then we get into the politics of who got there first, right?
Yeah.
If you got there first in terms of there being UNESCO and the kind of putting it on the list or trying to put it on the list, right? Mm-hmm. If you got there first, then I, the next door neighbor who also owns this, then I'm thinking, right, what do we do here? If I go here under, for example, Karsten has a political advantage in terms of soft power, prestige. He's done it first. I'm second in the list, right? So what do? I say, you can claim your own Chevgan, and I am going to say that we do it only with brown and, I don't know, blue sticks. And that's how we're different, therefore it's called Chogan. And that's but it's the same thing. Why this splitting of the same thing into many things that are pretty much overlapping, and it becomes a question of power competition then, as opposed to really being about heritage. That's the thing.
That's why you can have Turkish coffee in Turkey, Greek coffee in Greece, and Armenian coffee in Armenia, and you can have Lebanon coffee in Lebanon, and it's the same. And,
exactly the same.
You can't pinpoint it to one place.
Yep.
Music is the same. Sorry, yes. I think Ali, you want to say something?
If no one wants to ask a question, I just want to make a small comment. I just don't want to jump in the line 10, like hijack the Q&A. So if not, I can make a comment.
Come on.
So when we talk about Rumi, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting case because, you know, he was inspired by Shams Tabrizi, and we Tabrizis are like starting to say, oh, he's the main inspiration. I'm from Tabriz. So, but when I visited there, for Iranians, Rumi has a very Sufi face. For Turkish people, I lived in Turkey for 4.5 years, and for them it has a very Islamic face. So it's like a Jonas. It has one side Islamic, one side Sufi. So when I took my dad, he's like a big fan of Rumi. When we entered, this term Ali used, commodified element, hit my dad in the face, and he said, what are these people doing here? What's happening here? And an interesting thing from an Ottoman time, they have a box that they call it Sakkal-ı Şerife, means the holy beard, which beard, and they believe that like goes back to the prophet. And there's a smell of rose coming and people going down and smelling. So such a like a local element. And let's not forget the Konya province is the stronghold of AKP. Always they're getting 80% of their votes from that province. And one of the provinces that put AKP all the time in the polls ahead of all the places is this province, which is the largest one. So that was the comment that I want just to make. And a question, again, just want to pass the conversation to Ali. Interestingly, I was looking at Anderson yesterday, Benedict Anderson's Imagine Communities. And in 2 places, he talks about Iran. The first one is about language. And again, it goes back to the Turkish language, which again, another like quotation into quotation mark. When I'm here, I'm Iranian by nationality, but I'm not Persian. I never identify myself as Persian. And if I'm in Turkey,
exist.
What?
There is no such thing as Persian. I was talking to Karsten about it. There is no such thing as Persian. We don't have Persians.
Yeah, and but Abrahamian talks about Persian, non-Persian.
Yes, he's a Tudei. He's a Marxist-Leninist. That's where the idea is coming from.
Yeah, and when I moved to Turkey, and that's the difference. If I say I'm Iranian, they will call me Azeri, but the second comment will say, "Oh, you're one of us." They always try to like get the person. Yeah, and what I found very interesting about Anderson's book is that in 2 paragraphs he talks about the Turkic language and the treatment of these languages, and how in the later revolution with Ataturk, it became Romanized. Let's say they used the Latin alphabet, but there was a very anti-Persian language, let's say, like anti-Farsi campaign by Russians.
Purification.
Yes, purification, and also anti-Persian comment. My question to Ali is that, because I know you studied Azerbaijan and how things worked over there in your fabulous article, I read it. It was very great. So how you see the void actually created by USSR in terms of Persianness, let's say, or like the Farsi language, that probably Turkey could fill that void after that, like, let's say, purification, or like pushing that kind of a Farsi influence in those geographies. What are your observations on that?
By pushing, do you mean by pushing back on Farsi influence?
Yes. So like
right.
This is like it's not my word, it's Anderson's word. It says anti-Persian. So
yeah,
there are a few words that goes around in his book. Russification is one. Yeah. And the other one is like anti-Persian work. So what are your observations?
Yeah. Before I say that, when Turks claim you should tell them "Memki de mende, senki de sende." That's what
yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, it was a little Turkish banter. I said, "What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours." Keep your hands off in Turkish.
That's the thing. Like I'm literally someone that belongs to everywhere but also nowhere, and I'm sitting in Australia, Queensland.
Well, that's called the life of a migrant. But let me tell you about the Persian thing.
Can I just ask one thing
Yep.
to you guys. When I meet people in Turkey who tell me, actually, I'm coming from Iran, but I'm Turkish. What would that mean, Azeri?
It should, in general, it should, but it could also mean somebody who speaks Turkish, but could be from Mashhad, from east of Iran. Because I mean, it's a mistake that generally is out there that Iranian, we call them Turks in Iran, like Turkish, or that is only Azerbaijan. It's not. It's all over, and it's everywhere, and also in tribes that also are mobile. So that makes it difficult unless they say, actually, I'm from this.
It can be closer to Shiraz or Kashgais. It can be someone from like close to Bojnur, who is like southeast. I'm from Tabriz, and that's northwest actually. So it's a mixed population.
Yeah, unless they'd say I'm Turkmen, which is okay. That is clear what they are. It's not this other group.
Sure.
Sorry. To what you said. Sorry, to the question, and I'm kind of speaking as a non-expert here, obviously, because I have done no studies in this area that you're talking about. So therefore, I'm just sharing an uneducated opinion, if you will. Look, it seems to me that the pushback on Persian as a language, or even Persian association, that has a longer history, and it's about the winding down and the waning of the imperial power. This is pre-modern time. That I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's happening. So yes, did the Russians and then the Soviets try to push other agendas and de-Persianize, if you will, the populations that they had occupied, for example, in the South Caucasus? Yes, they did. And I would do the same, because I'm taking this over. Come on, now it's me. That's it's not nice, but it's understandable, right? But I think this may actually go beyond that and before that, right? And when we project to the present, after in the post-Soviet era, could, if I understand you correctly, could Turkey, instead of Iran, fill the gap? My opinion, I would say, unfortunate as an Iranian, but as an observer, makes no difference, is quite possibly. I think it's quite possible that Turkey can do that. And well, this is it. Iran is an isolated country for reasons that go back to its rulers to begin with. That's it. And well, you saw what you reap what you sow. This is it. So unfortunate, but yes, it may well be the case.
Okay, Masoud, I should ask you: do you want to stop on at past exactly, or do we have an open end?
That's fine. If there are pressing questions, we can go over time. So there's no problem.
I think Mehdi has a question.
That Mehdi, I think he had a question earlier.
Yes,
Mehdi,
thank you, Masoud.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Ali. Fascinating presentation and excellent research, as always.
Thank you.
I just have one quick question. You mentioned that Turkey has been de-emphasizing the link between Nowruz and Turkey, which I think also means that Turkey has been emphasizing or accentuating Turkey's significance. And I wonder, in doing so, whether Turkey also tries to distinguish its version of Nowruz or its Nowruz practices from Iranian practices, or in a sense, project a different version or a different sense of Nowruz. And if that's the case, and I'm asking that for my research at this point, and if that's the case, what tools or what methods does Turkey use to project that different image? Are any of them art and architectural tools?
Okay, now your question has two sides. The art and architectural tool, or especially the architectural one, I have done no research in this, so allow me to pass on that question. But going back to the first part of the question, where you ask if Turkey is trying to invent its own practices. Look, let me preface this by saying that the practices of Nowruz are not necessarily, historically speaking, standard practices that everybody repeats no matter where your geography is. There are variations, naturally, as in any other tradition. And like the Turkish bus that we were discussing, it's still designated as Nowruz, and you can recognize it as such, but it's not that they're exactly the same, right? And some of the bits and bobs that we have in the Nowruz Sofra, for example, they are not ancient in terms of their appearance in what constitutes the tradition now in Iran, for example, right? In addition to that, in some parts of the Soviet Union, some parts who had affiliations with the Iranic culture, this was forgotten for a while, and they're remembering it. And this includes parts of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has a different celebration of Nowruz, and it's reinventing it in some ways. And this reinvention, I don't know how much of that is to spite Iran. I know that they are at loggerheads, but some of it is, some of it, they're just remembering some of it, right? Or in the process of remembering, you remake. I think the biggest nemesis that the Turks in Turkey they had is the Kurds. That's their motivation. It's not in terms of taking up Nowruz. Yes, Nowruz has all this other benefits of geostrategic pushing of boundaries and everything else, but really it's about drowning those guys out. The Kurds, who, as I mentioned, they also invented it. It wasn't the way they say. They also invented it, but that's what they're doing. It seems from what I read and what I've gathered that the celebrations that the Turkish government officially puts on or has put on in terms of setting the fire, there are certain things for those who don't know the details of it. They have been rather clinical, and they have been received rather coldly by the population. It seems that it hasn't been catching on as much as they wanted. However, it seems that it's been equally successful in their first strategic goal, which was pushing back on this, especially the PKK business of, and mind you, here is a personal opinion, not a scholarly one. I think it's a terrible thing that PKK took something and turned it into a Marxist-Leninist or Trotskyist tradition, as opposed to what would have been part of their the collective culture of Kurds, their internal diversities notwithstanding. So, but when you do that, that's what you get from the state from the other, and they do equally terrible things, I think. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question.
Absolutely. Compelling and fascinating. Thank you, Ali.
Okay, so any more questions, comments? Masood?
Yeah. May I ask a couple of things? One is, Nowruz, as we all noticed, is registered as World Heritage event, in the UNESCO. And so I was wondering, you referred to that, Alijan, but how was this registered as a World Heritage? Was it the instigation of Turkish or really independently?
No. In order for you to register, and Carsten, please correct me in terms of procedures if I'm wrong, somebody has to actually submit a dossier. The way it works in UNESCO, there are many interesting stuff. They just don't go pick and choose by themselves. Various countries, because this is an interstate organization, various countries who have representation there, they get a chance, according to some schedule and the rest of it, to present a case if they have something. And nowadays, because it is prestigious, a lot of countries are in competition to put in World Heritage, because that raises your profile. So in some cases such as this, it is inevitably across countries, like the Silk Roads, for example. UNESCO for years has programs of trying to get multiple registrations. I mean, how can you claim a road single-handedly? It's impossible almost, right? So every country joins, and each doing their own thing, but it becomes a joint submission. So the case of Nowruz is no different. There had to be a dossier. But this dossier, that's where politics also kick in. Who puts it in first? Well, it wasn't Iran. But then objections happen. They say, oh, we have to be on the list too. That sort of thing, and just as with other cases I mentioned. And that's how other countries come in. So, but Iran, one would think that Iran should have been at the forefront, but I think they weren't.
Well,
Yeah.
Pejman John, you had something to add. Pejman.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
You're also visible.
Okay. We can
Oh, okay.
see your radiant face too.
Thank you, Master John, for organizing the event. Thank you, Ali,
Pleasure.
for a wonderful presentation. As you mentioned, the dossier via UNESCO, I checked the file a couple of days ago, and actually the dossier was presented to UNESCO via the Republic of Azerbaijan. And as far as I remember from that time, they were trying to give this impression that it's a cultural heritage from the Republic of Azerbaijan.
Yep.
But after lots of discussions in the file, it's clearly mentioned that the dossier was presented to UNESCO from the Republic of Azerbaijan, but they have emphasized in the text on its Persian origin. And I have to explain really something. Of course, you guys already know about it, but Persian here doesn't mean that it's about one ethnic group in Iran. Persia actually was the former international and official name of the country until 1935, and it means anything related to Persia or Iran. If we think Persian here means something related to an ethnicity, it's totally wrong, because if we look at this issue from racial point of view, Iranian can be racial as well, because because Iran means land of Aryans, and maybe how we can prove who is Aryan Iran and who is not. So, especially sometimes I hear that from some friends that we are Iranian, but we are not Persian. I think it's modern misunderstanding about the historical meaning of Persian. It doesn't mean that when you say we are Persian, it means from Persia. It doesn't mean that you are from Persian speaking layer of the country. So if you say I'm Iranian, but I'm Turk, so you can't be Iranian either, because Iranian means Aryan and the Turk maybe is not Aryan. So the true thing, and that these terms are historical terms, and we cannot look at them from racial point of view. In the past, as you know, the name of the countries could be taken from a name of a region, from a name of a river, like Hind, India, which comes from the name of the river Sindh. So anyway, that's a very long discussion. Just in regard of UNESCO, as you mentioned, the dossier was presented to UNESCO from the Republic of Azerbaijan, but they researched the case, and in the text, it's the Persian origin is mentioned. But Ali clearly mentioned that what the Turkish government is doing is also something related to their Kurdish community as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that. I think, can I just say that I don't even agree that Iranians are Aryan or anything. I think that's another mythology, in my opinion. I mean, whatever they are. I think that what I was trying to emphasize when I responded to you, Ali, was that Persian is not an ethnicity, and that's the confusing thing. You know, it's not. Turkish is an ethnicity, and that's fine. Baluchi is an ethnicity. Kurd is an ethnicity, as broad, as flexible as they are, right? And the boundaries are, well, a Kurd in 200 years ago, a Kurd is not the same Kurd as now. If we think otherwise, we're basically objectifying them. But Persian is not an ethnicity, and it hasn't
the language, yeah.
It hasn't been that way either. And remember, when we call Persia, I was speaking to Karsten before, it's an exonym. The country was never called Persia by those who are in it. You know, and I doubt it was if it was ever called Persia, for example, by the Ottomans or by anybody else around it. This is just a very, very distant exonym in that sense. But anyway, that's my thoughts. Thank you for the correction, Pejman. I stand corrected. It wasn't a joint effort. It was Azerbaijan, which also speaks, you know, to the fact that Azerbaijan, who has been a very good player, by the way, hitting very much above its weight. You know, this is a tiny country. This is, I think it's around 6 million, right? And it's very active in the international arena. We have to look at things objectively here. Very active in the international arena. very much promoting a cultural agenda that it has. Yes, some of it is constructed, some of it is absolutely not true, but but it's doing it. We have to look at the process as it's happening, right? And therefore, in that sense, they are successful in policy making.
They're using their money. They're also using their money. They're
They
really
use it wisely.
the UNESCO.
They're using it wisely. They have a UNESCO center. They're using it, so it speaks of having a process, having thinking, having plans. Well, there you go. So
they have this very complete plan for how to let's say, to transform the Armenian heritage in Nagorno-Karabakh.
Yeah,
chipping down old inscriptions in Armenian and saying these were false, installed by the Armenians and so on.
Yeah,
it's very they're really very smart about it, and also because they put in so much money, there's a reluctance to criticize them.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I mean,
yeah.
We look at we look at the process, Carsten. This is not, I mean, for you and me, and I'm sure others here, it's not a matter of nationalistic perspectives. We're looking at perspectives at the processes, and well, they're executing the process clearly.
We're seeing history hitting back. I mean, history going on with the old history.
Yeah.
Okay, Ali, right?
Yeah, just like one of the final points, adding to these discussions, they also started all the reconstruction projects and also heritage projects in Greece. So when they started to reinstate their heritage, because Greek government didn't have that money, they literally started to make the renovations for the Acropolis, and they played Azerbaijani tar at the antiquity time amphitheater. And the guy, interestingly, I have a friendship with him. He played Greek sirtaki with an Azerbaijani tar, with also getting all the international other musical, let's say, schools like Indian or European or like all these like things. And with Nowruz, thanks for mentioning it, Ejman. I think they have this like symbolism with fire, and they also try to make architectural elements that look fire. And they started to make this as a, like, let's say, nation building project. And they use Nowruz as one of the main elements.
Well, it is. As you know, the name of the country is also borrowed.
Yes.
Because it was only called Azerbaijan in a serious way after 1900s, upon its the creation of the First Republic. And at that time, there are serious contesting battles between intellectuals who speak both languages and are across the border. And Iranian intellectuals, even of Azeri background, are telling them, why are you doing this? You are doing the Ottoman bidding here. That's what they're saying. You're doing the Turkish and Ottoman bidding. That's what they contest the name. And that's interesting. That's been there. So yeah, there you go.
But just like final thing that I observed recently, when Ottoman and Qajar dynasties, Ottoman Empire and Qajar dynasty wanted to draw the line, the people that they asked to draw the border line were Russians, because they documented everything so well. They went for their cartographers and said, like, where should we draw the line? And that's where Minorsky and Khanikov came and said that this should be the modern line between this state and that state. So
that's in the Iran, Turkey, but the side that we're talking about is Iran, Russia, and they have their own people to do it.
Yes, definitely. They literally say, that's the geography. This is the Aras River. This is you. This is us.
That's it.
Yeah.
Very easy.
Very easy. Thank you. That was amazing. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
One more thing, Pejman John, did you discover what year that Nowruz was registered as World Heritage?
I think it's 2016.
2016. Okay.
2019 or 16? I can't remember.
Okay, I have forgotten, but the entire file is available online on the website of UNESCO. Every single detail is mentioned there.
I can tell you right now, it is inscribed in 2016 on the on the pre-representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. So there you go, 2016, I was right then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
One final comment, the whole concept of Persianate culture, I go back historically to the turn of the century with the constitutional revolution. As you have noticed, you had some very influential writings through the journals of Mullah Nasruddin and the like, which actually influenced the whole concept of new constitution, establishment of constitution. And it was basically run by a bunch of, these Azari or Persian speaking intellectuals who were based in Baku.
Yep.
And really they communicated to Iran. And that was the most popular, the journal in Iran
Absolutely.
circulated so widely.
Yep.
And it was very influential to the whole business of political, as Ali mentioned, about that concept that influencing the
look, you
political
cannot, in my opinion, Masood John, and I'm going to be very brief. In my opinion, you cannot separate these peoples and places. And I don't mean in territorial, revanchist kind of terminology. Let's go and conquer, Baku now. That's not what I mean at all. What I'm trying to say is that this exchange through history has happened for such a long time that it's not only wrong, it's impossible to actually separate these two, despite the 70-year Russian Soviet interlude, despite that. And also the other thing is that it is also the product of movement across borders, that thought develops, that ideas circulate, and things, because minds become impregnated with new ideas, and the things find new grounds. So there you go. Even leftist movements before Soviet came to Iran through that region, and many other things, and vice versa. So there's no denying that, I think.
Okay, wonderful, everybody. That was so enlightening and wonderful discussion, lively discussion. And I'm sure you didn't mind that we went over time, and
I loved it.
We're all really delighted, to have this discussion. And thank you profusely to both of you, Ali John and Karsten, for really creating this wonderful, environment for discussion. And I wish you all success and happiness.
Thank
and
you.
All the participants, thank you very much.
Thank you. We should thank Karsten. I think we should thank Karsten.
Well, thank you,
Karsten, for handling this and for your very good questions. Also, everybody, including Ali Hamshahri, very good.
Yeah.
Lovely to
meet you. Thank you for being part of this. I was very pleased, and I learned a lot from you, all of you, and that was so great. So yeah, I hope to be in touch, and
absolutely.
So enjoy and have a fine weekend once you are free to have it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Masood. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.